I'm Robert Martinez, state historian of New Mexico. This is New Mexico history in 10 minutes. France had a revolution in 1789, and what happened was there was 10 years of instability and terror after the peasants had revolted against the church, the nobility, the monarchy, and then in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte came to power and imposed a dictatorship on France. Napoleon, like his descendant Adolf Hitler, was not happy merely having control over France. He wanted to control all of Europe, and he almost succeeded. Two things happened that were similar to what happened to Adolf Hitler in the 1930s and 1940s. Napoleon was resisted by the Russians and by the British. Now, Napoleon wanted to really knock the British out of the game. So what he did in the early 1800s, around 1803, he wanted to impose the continental system on England. And what he was going to do was strangle England economically. He told all the other European powers, don't you dare trade with England. I will punish you if you do. He was quite a powerful and formidable military leader and political leader. Well, England had an ally in Portugal. Portugal kept shipping goods to England and kept that connection going. So what happens is Napoleon invaded Spain in order to get to Portugal and defeat Portugal and stop Portugal from helping England. Well, something happened on the way to Portugal. The king of Spain was removed from the throne, and Napoleon put his brother Joseph on the throne in Spain, and the king of Spain was exiled to Cadiz, the southern city in Andalusia, Cadiz, Spain. So what happens in this period for about 8 to 10 years is Spain is no longer the world power she used to be. France is very powerful, and it's in this time period that this form of warfare, which had been used throughout history, but it really comes to the fore in Spain, it's called a little war. The word for war in Spanish is guerra. A little war is guerrilla. In English, it looks like guerrilla. So that's where we get guerrilla warfare. The Spaniards would go to their mountains. They knew their terrain really well. The French didn't. And then they would attack the French military when they didn't know the Spaniards were coming. They would use less than modern means to defeat the French. And it really weakened the French military while they were in Spain. Well, something happens in Spanish law when the king is not on the throne, either by death, there's no succession or assassination. When this happens, all the outlying kingdoms, going back to the ancient fueros or laws of Spain, they have self-rule. They go into self-rule until the king is back on the throne. Well, this happens when the king of Spain is exiled. So imagine that. Places like Mexico City, Lima, Peru, the Philippines, Cuba, all these outlying places of the Spanish Empire, all of a sudden they have their own taste of independence. Well, around 1810, the king decides that he needs to know what's going on in his world empire. So he sends the word out throughout the empire that he wants representatives sent to a Spanish Cortes to report to him the state of his empire. And representatives from around the world, from Spain's world empire, would go to Cadiz to report to him. In New Mexico, there's a man named Pedro Pino. He's well off. He has some political power and some wealth. So he is chosen to represent New Mexico in Cadiz. So what happens is he goes down to Mexico, gets on a ship, and goes to Cadiz, Spain, and reports to the king. He wanted us to have a bishop so that we wouldn't have to answer to the Bishop of Durango, Mexico, which we had done since the 1600s. So that's one of the things he wanted. Well, in his report that has been translated and published, he also makes all kinds of observations about New Mexico's economy, about the terrain, but also the people. And what's fascinating is he makes the claim that there were no castes of African origin in New Mexico, as he had seen, obviously, in places like Mexico City, Zacatecas, and Veracruz. He said that in New Mexico, there are only Spanish and Indian people. He obviously didn't know his history, and he obviously did not have DNA at his disposal, but there obviously were people of African background in New Mexico going back centuries, and they were part of us. They just had become, well, part of us through marriage and through biology. So they were there. He just didn't see them. But what I found fascinating about his report was a comment he made about the Spanish and the Indians. And he was talking about Pueblo Indians mainly. He said, they are indistinguishable from us. We look the same. So there's something going on there in that clearly by 1810, 1811, the New Mexico Hispano population had become really Nuevo Mexicano, no longer really looking like peninsular Spaniards or Españoles, rather looking like New Mexicans. And that's what I interpret his words to mean. So this is Pedro Pino, and he is obviously looking back at New Mexico, but he's looking forward to. He wants New Mexico to move forward as a province of the Spanish Empire. And clearly, New Mexico was part of that system, that colonial system that would eventually create Mexico, and that New Mexico was part of and would still, again, become part of in about 11 years. So Pedro Pino was New Mexico's representative to the Spanish Cortes at Cadiz. He came back, we did not get a bishop, and not much changed. A saying or dicho came down to us from his adventure to Spain to show that things as they were remained and would continue to be so. And it went like this. Don Pedro Pino fue, Don Pedro Pino vino. Pedro Pino went, Pedro Pino came back. And that's that. So that's it for now. I'm Robert Martinez. Thank you for being with me. I will see you next time. Goodbye.